Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. In our first 240 or 50 videos we've done on the channel, I've pretty much covered every single idea that would help a player rated, let's say, under 2,000 improve. We've talked about all the common amateur mistakes and what you do to avoid them. We've talked about quiescence errors, ABC errors, hope chess, hand waving, all those kind of typical errors I see over and over and over again, and what you have to do to improve your thought process. We've talked about gaining knowledge versus skills. We've done a lot of things. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about the knowledge base that people have at different levels and how it enables them to recognize certain ideas and deal with them based on their knowledge, because we've always said that knowledge is important. Maybe skills are more important, but that doesn't mean that knowledge is not important. Knowledge is extremely important. So the book I got out is a book that's about 20 years old. It's written by a friend of mine, International Master Igor Khmelnitsky. Igor is an actuary, or at least he was, and I think he just recently won the US Senior Championship. And Igor wrote this book, and every position in the book has 2 multiple choice questions to it. And you guess the multiple choice answers, or at least you don't try to guess, you try to figure them out. And then he shows you the answers. And what Igor does is very interesting. Again, the name of the book is Chess Exam and Training Guide. He shows you how well people did every 400 rating points. So for instance, we'll have a chart and it'll show you people rated 0 to 1,000 did so well, 1,000 to 1,400 did so well, 14 to 1,800 how well they did, 1,800 to 2,200, 2,200 to 2,400, 2,400 to 2,800. And basically what happens is in every problem there's a spot at which people can either know it or figure it out. So for instance, suppose you have a problem that's 50-50 for people that are rated 1,900. Then that means if we look on the chart and it says 18 to 2,200, since the break-even point for people is 1,900, then most people 18 to 2,200 are above 1,900, and they're going to get more than 50%. And when you go up to the next level, 22 to 2,400, you're going to get way over 50%. And when you go down to the next level, 14 to 1,800, you're going to get way under 50%. And of course, the further up you go, the better they do, and the further down you go, the worse they do. So every problem has a different level where people do well on it. So let's take a couple problems from the book and we'll see what we can learn, and we'll see how much is knowledge and how much is skill and analysis and evaluation and so on. All right, so this is a problem from the book. This is problem number 40. And the first part of the problem is to evaluate the position. The 4 choices he gives you is white is winning, white is better, nearly equal, and black is winning. So those are the 4 choices. White's winning, white's better, nearly equal, black's winning. Okay, then they ask you, what's the best move? They go knight from g3 to f5, knight to e2, queen to f3, or both a and b are equally good for white. All right, so you have to pick, again, the moves. The four choices are knight f5, knight e2, queen f3, and choice D, both A and B are equally good for white. So if you want to stop the video and pause it and try to get those 2 questions right, we'll take a look at it, then we'll ask the computer also what his answer is. All right, so again, the first one is white is winning, white is better, nearly equal, or black is winning. You have to pick which one. And what's the best move? Knight f5, knight e2, queen f3, or both A and B, the 2 knight moves are equally good for white. Okay, well, I think most people over 2,000 do this one based on knowledge. And I've seen the position after the next move in many books. It's a famous mistake position. In the game, I'm almost 100% positive, white blundered with knight to f5. And now he was pinning the bishop to the rook. If the bishop moves, the white can take the rook. So white was expecting that black would win or black might resign. And black did resign in this position. And then after the game, everybody rushed up to black and said, "Why did you resign?" And black said, well, I'm losing the bishop. If I move the bishop, I'm losing the rook. And they pointed out to him that actually he has a move that doesn't, not only does save the tactic, but also wins the game. And that move is bishop to g1. Bishop to g1 threatens mate on h2 and the queen. And therefore, white has to stop the mate, and he has to give up the queen for the bishop and the rook. He has to play something like king takes, rook takes, and then let's say bishop takes, when he's going to be losing here. He's down in material and he's got a bad game. Let's see, can black do the same thing on knight to e2? Does knight to e2 change anything? Knight e2, bishop here. Well, again, he's got to stop the mate. In both those cases, he could move the queen over and stop the mate. But then after rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, he's again losing. If he takes the bishop, either way, then rook takes, bishop takes. So that leads to an interesting semantic question, which is, answer D was either move is equally good for white. Well, that is actually true, because they are equally good for white. Equally good meaning they're not good at all, which means they both have zero goodness for white. So the equal goodness is actually correct. But I would think that Igor doesn't want that answer. My guess is that Igor wants you to play queen to f3, which avoids that problem, since knight e2 and knight f5 fault that problem. Queen f3 avoids the problem because there's no discovery on the queen, and then bishop g1 is just a silly move because there's no mate threat. So queen f3 avoids all the problems, but it does leave black with the bishop pair. And I don't think black has a lot of problems here, but queen f... So it's funny that queen f3 is a better move than the other two moves, but you might argue with Igor, you should have worded that a little differently. Instead of saying both A and B are equally good for white, maybe he should have said both A and B are good for, are somewhat both good for white, or something that implies that they're both good rather than equally good, which could be zero good. I know that's splitting hairs in semantics, but hey, Igor's an actuary. You know, my bachelor's in mathematics, and I do a lot of semantic stuff. So equally good is actually somewhat true. So let's look at his answer. His answer is that move C, queen f3 is the best, and it shows that at 1400 to 1800. Only 30% of the people pick move C, pick C, which is nearly equal, which is the right. But at 1800 to 2200, 75% pick nearly equal. Okay, as far as the right move, at 1400 to 1800, 57% pick queen f3, 65% at 1800 to 2200 pick C, and then 79% at 22 to 2400. Now, what's interesting is both A and B are equally good. At the lowest level, there's several people pick that they're equally good at the lowest level, but then as you get to the higher and higher level, more and more people pick that, probably for the exact same semantic reason that I did, that they're equally bad, which means they're also equally good. So 10% said that, and then 21% of people between 2200 and 2400 said that they're equally good. And those people all realized pretty much that that move C avoided the famous trap. Now, did they all realize it? I don't know. But when you get to 2400 to 2800, they didn't go for the semantics. They all said that you should just play queen f3. All right, now, it's 20 years since Igor wrote the book, and the computers are a lot better now. So let's look at the top three moves. We know the computer's not going to fall for the trap of knight f3, knight e2, but is queen f3 really the best move? All right, let's take a look. Here we go, top three moves. You can see them underneath. We'll pull them up a little higher so you can see a little better. All right, right now, Stockfish 14.1 is saying there's only one good move in the position, and that's rook f1. And notice the answer A, the first problem was the answer was it's nearly equal, and that's correct, but it's only nearly equal if you find the move rook to f1. So rook f1 gives you that near equality. Queen to f3 right now is the third best move, but it's minus 1.26. So if white does play the move that's the right answer for the first problem, then in the second problem, then in the first problem, he's not nearly equal. He's actually fairly lost. So it is nearly equal, but only on rook f1, which wasn't one of the choices. Again, you know, Igor's writing this book. Let's see, what's the copyright date? Copyright 2004. So the book's 17 years old. And of course, that's the kind of thing you find. I'm sure Igor had decent computers to use in 2004, but they're just that much better now. All right, so we can see the reason I solved this problem is not because I figured it out. This was a knowledge problem for me. I've seen books on famous resignation positions, and the position after knight f5, bishop g1, where white resigned, and he shouldn't have, because black could have instead played bishop to g1, winning. In fact, let's show you the evaluation on this move. After knight f5, Mr. Computer, what would you play? Bishop g1 is -6. The next best move is +5. Well, you can see how critical this is. If you find the move that makes him resign, then of course you're winning. And if you don't find the move that makes him resign, you can resign. So bishop to g1 saves the day. And I solved this problem simply by remembering this knight f5 move. And then I simply had to calculate, does knight e2 allow the same thing? Mr. Stockfish, it does, right? Mr. Stockfish says, yes, of course it does, which is what I calculated. So therefore, they're equally bad, or as I said, equally good for white. And those are not the moves you should play. And the only other choice that was given for moving, besides knight f5 and knight e2, was queen f3, other than picking that they're equally good. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to have to pick queen f3 unless I want to nitpick his wording. All right, let's look at another problem in the book. Let me pause the video for a second to set it up for you. Okay, here's the second problem from the Chess Exam and Training Guide. This is problem number 5, white to play. And the two questions that he asked, each one is multiple choice with 4 possibilities. The first question is, what result would you expect? A is white wins, B is black wins, C is a draw, and D is can go either way. Then they ask, what is the best move? A, king to h8, B, king to f8, C, either move draws, and D, either move loses. Okay, so if you'd like to do this puzzle, again, you could pause it. Let me read the questions again before you pause. What result would you expect in the game? A, white wins, B, black wins, C, draw, D, can go either way. Second question, what is the best move for white? King h8, king f8, either move draws or either move loses. Okay, if you want to pause the video and figure it out, go ahead, and then we'll talk some more about this problem number 5. Okay, so when I do this problem, again, we're using knowledge to the most extent, but I have to back it up with a little bit of analysis. A lot of times you have knowledge and you say, I think this is this problem, I think I've seen it before, and then you double check it. So that would be a combination of knowledge and skill, but it starts with the knowledge. And here, you could have the same knowledge too if you watch some of my other videos. The video I point people to is my king and 3 pawn against king and 3 pawn video with the famous 3 pawn trap. And I start out by giving the famous 3 pawn against 3 pawn, but then I show what happens if the defending king is close enough that the famous trap doesn't work. And that's actually the main part of the video. And I go into that in some great detail. Let me make the window bigger here so we don't need the computer analysis yet. Okay, so if you saw that video, there's actually a kind of idea that it would appear in this particular problem as well. So if you watch that video, you probably have an idea of what the right answer is here. All right, so let's talk about the first question, which is white wins, black wins, draw, can go either way. Well, one of those 4 we can eliminate right away. we can eliminate can go either way, because this is a dead, exact, deep endgame. And that means if both sides play perfectly, somebody's going to get a result. Either white's going to win, or white's going to draw, or white's going to lose. But there's no ifs, ands, or buts about positions like this. That wouldn't be true really early in the game when, you know, you could have a double-edged position where both sides have castled opposite sides and are both attacking, and looks like maybe somebody will win, but we can't quite figure out who's going to get there first. Then you could say it goes either way. But in deep endgames, it's never can go either way. So we can eliminate D. A, B, C, white wins, black wins, draw. Well, if we find the best move, we could probably figure that out. So let's see what happens here. Right now, the action is over here, and white has to move the king, and he only has 2 legal moves. Most people are going to say, all right, well, maybe moving toward the action is the right idea. So let's say white plays here. All right, well, what's black's plan? Black's plan is to come down and get this pawn. But there's many paths that he can do that with, and I think the right idea here is to keep the white king blocked in as long as possible before you go. Well, since you don't have to go down yet, the right move here, if I was playing a speed game, I wouldn't think twice. I would play king here with the idea that it can't hurt to keep blocking him in. And now let's see what happens if white tries to get out of this. If white keeps going this way, black's just going to come down and take the pawn. So at some point, white has to run this way. But now when black goes here, and white tries to come up, and black comes up, and white comes up, and black comes down, and white comes up, down, here, takes, here, king here, and it's too late. You might say, but Dan, if he had gone this way, he would have made it. All right, let's take a look. We'll analyze that. King here, king here, king here. Okay, but the problem is he has to be able to take off this pawn, and this king's just going to take this pawn off. So king here, king here, king here, king here, king c3, king b5, king here, king down, king takes pawn, hopeless. The only way white's going to draw is if he gets his king to these squares and blocks the king in. Well, that's the hint as to what he should do. He should play king here. Now when black plays here, instead of having his king blocked where he can't come up to the next rank, he can come up to the next rank. And now the place he's trying to go to is here, not over here to guard the pawn. And if black tries to run and get the pawn, and white comes running behind him, when black goes here to take the pawn, white can play here and block him in, and now it's a draw. For instance, king here, king here. If the pawn pushes, then king c2 is stalemate. If king's up, we just keep bringing our king up forever, and we repeat the position 3 times with the draw. So, based on that other video, if you had seen king and 3 pawn against king and 3 pawns, which I did, then you would know there was a problem in there where it showed this idea of actually going away from the action to get around the king to block him in, and that's the right answer. So now we know that the result with white to play first should be C, draw, and second, it should be that king to h8 is the right move. Either move draws is incorrect. Either move loses is incorrect. King h8 gets you the draw. Okay, where do you think the break-even point on these 2 questions was? What rating level do you think understood that white could draw? And what rating level do you think realized that king h8 was the right move? Let's turn the page and we'll find out. So on the next page, everybody said that either black was a win or it was drawing. And in fact, even lower rated players for the most part thought it was a draw. But it wasn't until you got up above 1800 that it was almost getting close to 100% realized it was a draw. As far as the right method to draw, if below 1400 it was almost completely random. When I say random, it's multiple choice, so 25% is random. Even at 1000 to 1400, it was pretty random. At 14 to 1800, it started to move away from random, but now we saw more people were starting to realize that king h8 was the right move, but it still wasn't 50%. But when you got to 1800 to 2200, which is A players and experts, now it jumped from 43% got it right at king h8 to 92%. So we can see the break-even point must have been somewhere just around 1800 or slightly below. And then when you got above that, it was way, way, way over 50%. And then from 2200 and above, it was a pure 100%. Everybody got this right. So King H8 was the right move there. And we won't give it to the computer. That's too easy to figure out. All right, I guess we have time for one more. Let's pause and set one up. All right, this is problem number 45 in Igor's book, Chess Exam and Training Guide. White to play. All right, first question is evaluate the position. A, black's winning. B, draw. C, white's better. D, white's winning. Second question, what's the best move? Is it King C2, King C1, King B1, King C1, King B2, or E5? All right, let me read those again so you can try it at home. Is it A, black is winning? It's white's move. A, black is winning. B, draw. C, white's better. D, white's winning. And what is the best move? Since it's white's move, is it King to C2, King to C1, King to B2, or E5? All right, if you want to stop the video, you can, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, again, this is one that's pretty much knowledge, backed up by a little bit of analysis. But basically, what black's threatening to do is play King D4 and King takes E4, of course. And it's white's turn, and he really can't stop those threats. So he has to figure out the best way to get into position when something like that might happen. Now, I have a two-part video which covers this in great detail that I'm happy to say is King and Pawn against King, Chapter 1, and King and Pawn against King, Part 2. So if you've seen those videos, you probably know what the right answer is here. But if you haven't seen the videos, you could probably still figure it out. One of the big things I push in those videos is some principles that you need to know. In fact, they're not principles, they're rules, because they pretty much are true every time, where you can enumerate exceptions, which makes them rules. So here, the rule is very easy. If one side has a king and a non-rook pawn, and he's two or more ranks in front of the pawn, and when I say in front, I don't mean directly in front, it could be like one file to the side also. But if he's two or more ranks in front of the pawn, then he always wins. If you watched my videos and you heard me emphasize that time and time again, that would pretty much tell you the right answer here. Because if white moves the king anywhere, let's say king to C1 to get, quote, the distant opposition, and black goes here and you go here and you get the opposition, and black goes king takes E4 and you play king E2, then this is dead lost according to that principle. The black king is two or more ranks in front of a non-rook pawn, which means he's always winning. Why? Because white doesn't really have the opposition, because black has an extra tempo to move the pawn and still be behind the king. So black will just play pawn here and get the opposition. And now king here, king back, king C3. Doesn't matter where he goes. Let's say king D1, king D3, king E1, king C2, king here, pawn here, and we push in and we get a win. So that tells you, if you know the rule, that is, if a king and a non-rook pawn, the king can get two or more ranks in front of the pawn, and I talk about this a lot. In fact, I said in the video, that's one of the most important rules to know out of those videos. Then you would know instantly that all the king moves just lose. But if all the king moves just lose, does E5 also lose? That's the question. Well, if white plays E5, white's threatening to take the pawn. Black either has to take the pawn or push past. But if black pushes past, now the pawn is going to distract the black king and give white time to get a draw. For instance, now white's king can play up, and black can't play this way because the white pawn will go down and get a queen first. So black would have to do something like this, and white goes here, and black goes here, and white pushes the pawn, and black takes, white takes, draw. So therefore, after E5, the only move black has is to take the pawn. But now we notice he can't get two ranks in front. We can stop that. The question is, can white get the opposition? Well, now we have the distant opposition case. Now we want to play king to C1 and keep an odd number of squares in between. And if black tries to come up with king D4, we can play king D2. And now if king E4, king E2, and white has the opposition, king here, king F2. If black pushes, now white has to follow a different set of rules we talk about, which is one, don't let the king in front of the pawn. Well, the only move that does that is king to e2. And then, if the pawn reaches the 6th rank, you go straight back on the same rank as the pawn, same file. King e1, king f3, king f1, and if he ever pushes the pawn, king e1, king e3, stalemate. So let's do that again. e5. If black doesn't do anything, white will just take and get his draw. If black pushes past, white can come up and then push the pawn and get an easy draw. So he has to take, and now you don't want to play king to c2 because black will get the opposition with king to c4. You need to play king to c1. So first thing you have to do is sacrifice the pawn. Then you have to get the distant opposition. Then when he comes up, you get keep the opposition, he moves out of the way, keep the opposition. If he goes back, you come up and he's no longer in front of the pawn. If he pushes it, he's no longer in front. Now you have different rules to follow. The first rule is don't let the king in front of the pawn. That means you got to go here. And now he could go back and let you come up, but eventually he's going to have to push the pawn and go like here. Now you want to just block it, and when he goes here, straight back. Got to go straight back here. When the king comes up, you go here. I don't call this the opposition. A lot of teachers call this the opposition. I don't think it is. You're just having the correct tempo. I think it's only the opposition when the king's in front of the pawn, but that's just semantics. So black will push the pawn. If he goes back, we just repeat the position. White plays here, and now black has his choice. He can draw by insufficient mating material, or he can get a stalemate. So that's the answer. Where do you think the break-even point that Igor found for this problem is? All right, let's see if we can find out. All right, everybody understood that either black was winning or it was a draw, but people under 1,000 actually thought that black was winning than not. 1,000 to 1,400, the majority thought that it was a draw. 1,400 to 1,800, now we have a big majority thinking it's a draw, and over 1,800, it's 100%. So the 50% point looks like it's pretty low because at 1,400, we're already at 75%. So probably people by 1,400 kind of understood that this would be a draw, but did they understand how to draw? And the answer is no. They thought the draw, 50% of the people at 1,000 to 1,400 thought the draw was by getting the distant opposition right away with king to c1. So a little knowledge was a dangerous thing. They thought that king c1 was the right move. But by the time you get 1,400 to 1,800, the 50% dropped to 14% thought that king c1 was a draw, and all 86% of the other ones all realized that you had to play e5 first. So 86% of the people between 1,400 and 1,800 realized e5 was the drawing move. At 1,800 to 2,200, it was 92%. Surprised it wasn't maybe 100% by that point. And once you got to 2,200, it was 100%. So the break-even point in understanding it's a draw was lower, but they thought it was a draw for the wrong reason when it was around 1,400. It took people above 1,400, maybe in the 1,400 to 1,600 range, to start to realize that the distant opposition wasn't going to work here and that you had to play e5. And the overwhelming majority of C and B players did find e5 once they thought about it. Very good, guys. All right, hopefully you enjoyed the video today about Chess Exam and Training Guide. We're trying to hit all kinds of angles to help you improve your chess game. If you liked the video, hit the like button. You can subscribe to the channel. Biggest thing you can do is to tell your friends about the channel. By the way, I just hit my 5,000th follower on my Chess Tip of the Day on Twitter, and I have over 4,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So if you are a subscriber and you haven't followed me on Twitter, I have the Chess Tip of the Day, which I've been doing for 12 years, and I think I calculated I have roughly 4,000 tips, maybe 3,000 different tips, because I repeat some of the best tips every once in a while. Okay, we will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.